Good afternoon, everyone, from a rainy Washington, D.C. My name is Kristina Peters. I'm the K-12 Open Education Fellow at the Office of Educational Technology at the U.S. Department of Education. It's a really long title to tell you. That's just me. I'm Kristina. I'm a one-year fellow. I joined the team here in mid-April. I'm here on a one-year fellowship on loan from the Nebraska Department of Education, where I have been a digital learning specialist the past 3 years. I am a former elementary teacher, and I see some familiar faces here. So hi, everyone. It makes me really happy to see some familiar faces. It always makes this a little bit easier, you know. So this is intended to be an actual kind of presentation as far as the first 20 minutes, and then I will pause and take any questions along the way. But please feel free to leave things in the chat, and we can kind of look back at the chat and use that as a back channel if you have any questions along the way. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. All right. Can everyone see that? Can you give me like a thumbs up or like a nod or something? You can see that? Yes, okay, perfect. So if I go into presentation mode, can anyone unmute and tell me if they can see that? This is where we ran into issues last time.
We can see it, Kristina.
You can see it?
Yep, we can see it.
Oh, yay. Okay, good. Okay, this is, like I said, where we had some issues last time. So, okay, good. All right, so like I said, I now cannot see any of you, so I'm sorry. But I will flip back over whenever I finish up my little spiel here, and then we can address any questions. So GoOpen is an official hashtag. If you are on Twitter, please feel free to check out GoOpen, not to be confused with GoOpen, which we so lovingly call it around here. We have an active hashtag with folks that are participating in it from GoOpen Districts, as well as our GoOpen States, from some of our OER ambassadors from Creative Commons or different nonprofits that are contributing resources. And so it's an active hashtag, and we would encourage you to check that out. The National Ed Tech Plan is our foundational publication that we have here in the Office of Educational Technology. And this is the 2016 plan that was released back in January. This plan articulates a vision of equity, active use, and collaborative leadership to make everywhere, all the time learning possible. So it's based on years of work, really 2 years of my former colleague, Zach Chase, that looked at research and experience from a lot of our nation's schools, teachers, researchers, and educational professionals. And so this is the 5th iteration of the NETP. It first started in 1996. And so 20 years later, we are excited that we have a new one that we are looking at things much like ISTE. Their approach changed in their last iteration of their standards, where they got away from hardware and software, and they started to focus on specific skills. We are kind of looking at that in the NETP as well. You can see that it's a call to action, and you're looking at a collection of real-world examples. And it is written for a whole cross-section of stakeholders, from classroom teachers all the way to policymakers and anywhere in between, district-level decision makers as well. So we wanted to make this relevant for everyone that would pick it up and applicable right away. So classroom teachers can read this, as well as district-level decision makers, and really hopefully gain something in doing so. It's a little over 100 pages, but it is very, very good, and we would encourage you all to read it. It really talks about making possible everywhere, all the time learning, moving away from the anywhere learning, but the everywhere, all the time learning, because we know that kids come to us with devices in their back pockets. We also have hotspots that are going out on buses. We also have things like this, where, you know, we walk into a McDonald's or into a coffee shop, and we have Wi-Fi hotspots. So we know that the change is moving over to everywhere, all the time learning. NETP focuses on 5 specific sections where learning is at the center of everything that we're doing, surrounded by teaching, assessment, and leadership, and that is surrounded by a nimble, secure infrastructure. We really wanted to make sure that learning remained the focus of all that we were doing, and that how educational technology plays a piece in all of what we're doing. The last thing that this talks about is the digital use divide. We've all heard about the digital divide, but we want to talk about the digital use divide, where we know that students are coming to us knowing how to use technology, but primarily in a passive way, where they're consuming information through apps or videos or whatever that may look like, and starting to change that conversation so that it is active use. So using those devices and using technology to actually do things, where we're we have media production, or we're connecting with folks around the world, and they're also using specific tools for peer collaboration. So we're talking about not just the passive use, but the actual changeover to active use. So I start all of these presentations with NETP because it is that flagship publication that comes out of this office, and it really drives a lot of the work that we do. So then the next thing is where GoOpen actually kind of stems from. Connect Ed initiative was started 3 years ago when the president was famously quoted, "In a country where we expect free Wi-Fi with our coffee, we should definitely demand it in our schools." And 3 years ago, we had approximately 33% of our schools that had some sort of connectivity, and broadband connectivity at that. The goal that President Obama then put out there was that we wanted to create a higher demand of connectivity, or excuse me, not a higher demand, a higher connection of connectivity in our schools, as well as commitments from some high quality devices and software companies that you could leverage in a school from the district level, classroom level, and now even to the student level, that they would be able to take advantage of some of these things. Additionally, we had the professional learning piece, and then the high quality, affordable digital resources. I am excited to report that in the 3 years since Connect Ed launched, we are now connected at about a 75% rate across the country, which means that over 20 million students now have connectivity in their schools, and we're pretty excited about that. The professional learning piece is where the Future Ready District Pledge came from. This was a group of superintendents that got together and said, we really need to take a look at how we're looking at professional learning in our respective districts, and what some of our districts are doing that are, you know, ahead of where the others are. And so this is where the Future Ready District Pledge came to be. One of the tenets is providing access to quality content. You will see specifically at that last line that teachers are able to share, discover, and adapt openly licensed materials and teaching plans, which is where it lends itself to the conversations about openly licensed educational resources. Over 2,300 Future Ready Pledge signers, so over 2,300 superintendents across the country have signed this, impacting over 16 million students. I believe that there was a big push on Connect Ed Day last Tuesday. We've had about 100 more superintendents sign this. We would love to get to the point where we could say all 15,000 school districts across the country have signed up to be Future Ready districts. We're slowly but surely getting there, and that's pretty exciting when we start to talk about the impact on teaching and learning, specifically within professional learning purposes. And then that fourth quadrant was the access to high quality digital content and materials, and that is where GoOpen comes into play. So GoOpen, we realized that the goals, the approach, and the infrastructure was all changing, but that our materials were not keeping pace, whether that were textbooks that we were purchasing, maybe some databases or specific kind of web tools that we were purchasing. They were just not keeping pace. And so the idea came along that, you know, education is sharing, kind of like the Care Bears, if you want to think about that, caring is sharing. And so when we start to think about openly licensed, we talk about the fact that open does not necessarily equal free, and that open equals free with permissions. So I will actually refer you to these two symbols right here. So copyright. Many of us know this copyright symbol because it actually infers that all rights are reserved. And that can be a variety of things. That is actually something as simple as a grocery list that I leave on my counter, and if someone were to take that, but technically that copyright belongs to me. And you may think that that seems absurd. Sometimes it can be, but it is all rights reserved, and it is intended for the creators to be safeguarded against misuse of their materials. Hi, can we have someone mute, please? Okay. Of course, we also have fair use in education, where we can often claim, you know, for educational purposes, we can use things that are copyrighted. But if we start to change the conversation to something like a Creative Commons license, which is the symbol on the right side, then we know that those are openly licensed, and then it gives us the free plus permissions. And the 5 R's that are associated with the Creative Commons attribution license, which is the least restrictive, is reuse, revise, remix, retain, and redistribute. So reuse, I'm simply reusing the material as I see it, and I'm not going to infringe on copyright. Revising it means that I may change it, modify it for ELL accommodations, for special education accommodations, whatever that may look like, that I've actually revised it. Remix is where I've actually combined or mashed up multiple items. And so I have changed the original and I've remixed it with something else. Retain it, we don't often think about this, but with consumable materials, once we're done with them, we usually toss them. We may have some students that wish to keep their materials, but the retention piece of the materials is actually really important because that allows us to use things from year to year. So retaining and then redistributing. So let's say that I did revise for my ELL students, and I want to share that and kind of like a pay it forward. Redistribution is part of a Creative Commons attribution license that would allow me to do so. So all 5 of those R's, or those permissions, are granted to me with a Creative Commons license versus the copyright. Again, open, free, and unfettered access, perpetual, irrevocable copyright permissions. I also look at this in a table where you can see these side by side. Openly licensed educational resources, usually free or minimal cost. If you're going to print, there is some sort of cost usually associated with that. As far as what you can do with it. Free resources, something that you might find on Pinterest or on Teachers Pay Teachers. It may be free, but often the copyright still is restrictive on what you can actually do. So the flexibility may vary depending on the type of resource. We give an example of the Smithsonian Education, their Learning Lab. A lot of the materials are primary sources and they're available for free, but they are still copyrighted. So you just have to be careful on some of the things that you're doing. And then of course you have proprietary instructional materials, which can include anything from textbooks to a full course that you may have in Blackboard or your learning management system. The costs are going to vary depending on the type of resource. And most often the copyright is going to be in place. And so you have no flexibility with it. You have to use it as is. A little bit about GoOpen specifically, the history of this lovely movement that started back in October. It's very young, really. In October 2015, we had the official launch at the White House, where we had 6 GoOpen ambassador districts and 10 GoOpen launch districts. Our GoOpen ambassador districts are ones that had already transitioned to the use of openly licensed educational resources in their districts in some way, shape, or form in the past couple of years. The GoOpen launch districts are those that were committing to replace traditional instructional materials in one grade level and in one content area in the next 12 months. So the ambassador districts are providing a mentorship to the launch districts that are just getting started. We also had commitments from our committed organizations, ASCD and Creative Commons, to help provide professional learning for this. And then our GoOpen platforms. At that time, we had 3 GoOpen platforms, Microsoft, Amazon, and Edmodo. And they were committed to helping people be able to search and discover these resources. Then that takes us to the GoOpen Exchange, which happened at the end of February up at Skywalker Ranch. For any of you Star Wars fans, it was pretty cool to see a Yoda statue here. We had over 200 people that were all together from districts, from nonprofits, from some of our committed organizations. We increased the amount of districts that we had at that time to 40 districts that were all involved, and that's a combination of ambassador and launch districts. Then we had 14 states. This is the first time that states got involved with this whole project. They are providing guidance and leadership from the state level, and they are also, by doing so, they're talking about this in a statewide technology strategy where they're looking at openly licensed educational resources, and they're also looking at providing a repository for folks in their respective states to be able to search and discover these resources. Now, it doesn't have to just be OER, but it can also be things that states purchase, or AEAs, or ESUs, or whatever the service agency is in your respective areas, that they can all kind of coexist in the same marketplace. And so that's what our state's committed to doing back in February, and then we've added some more since then. We also increased to 5 platforms at that point, where we added Follett. Many of you are probably familiar with Follett Destiny, which is in your school libraries often. It's your catalog of all of your books and your resources that you have in there. And then OER Commons was another one that joined us. Additionally, we had 2 more committed organizations, the Center for Digital Education and CCSSO, that joined us. That leads us to ISTE at the end of June, where we had our GoOpen District launch packet finally released. This was the first time that we had an actual publication of the steps and phases that it requires for a district to look at going open. The Welcome to GoOpen phase gives you some of the basics of what open educational resources are, kind of the copyright and Creative Commons content that I just covered with you. And then it walks people through the different phases, how to get started, what are the grade level and content areas that you want to start to look at doing this. We realize that we want bite-sized chunks of things, and so just saying, you know what, we're not buying textbooks this next year for K-12 ELA is not always very feasible to do. And so what are some of the entry points that we can do? Organizing a team to help in this whole process, leveraging our school librarians that are already versed in how to curate content and can help us provide the professional learning that's part of phase 5. But making sure that it's a cross-curricular team as well, so that you have your subject matter experts from the district level or even just your teacher leaders, but then also looking from district level into classroom level and making sure that there is a wide variety of folks that are involved in part of this process. The third phase is looking at infrastructure. This is really important to make sure that everyone understands. Yes, there is a lot of content out there that's openly licensed that is digital, but we also realize that it's not always feasible to be one-to-one, and that we want to encourage people to consider doing this without having to be one-to-one. So infrastructure plays a huge role whenever we start to think about digital content, but we have some great examples from some school districts that are currently our GoOpen districts that have been able to do this without having the infrastructure for one-to-one. North Kansas City Public Schools is probably my most commonly used example for this. They started in their 6th grade science 3 years ago, where they decided to go ahead and replace their traditional science textbooks that they were going to purchase. And they did not have the one-to-one infrastructure for their students at that point. So they decided to take, they started with CK12, their flex books, and they reorganized and made sure that all the vocabulary was aligned with the Missouri State Science Standards. And then they printed in full color, and they were able to do them kind of a chapter or unit at a time versus a full textbook. And their initial budget for the textbook purchase that year was going to be $600,000 for 6th grade science. And even through paying their teachers the stipends and making sure that they were compensated for the time that they contributed that year, printing in full color, all of the things that were associated with going open, they only spent $60,000 total. So it's a huge savings. And also, the important piece right there is that, again, they were not one-to-one, but they were able to leverage the resources that were available digital and still print those. Of course, that leads into phase 4, which is ensuring quality. A lot of times we get questions about the quality of these resources, whether or not, teachers are hesitant sometimes to share their resources. They may think that they're not of quality. We are encouraging teachers, again, sharing is caring. So we're encouraging teachers to contribute to this overall sharing environment, and also talking about the differences between copyright and Creative Commons at the same time to make sure that everything is openly licensed and that it's legal to be able to share the things that we're doing. That 5th piece is professional learning. This does require some changes in our professional learning, because we know that it's not just the standard give some shrink wrap curriculum and hand that over, and you open up the book and you start on day 1 and you go through day 180. But it's really taking a look at how this impacts teaching and learning, and how this can afford the opportunity to personalize learning for our students by leveraging these resources to make the learning more relevant, but also to pique interest based off of student needs and student interests as well. And then we have our GoOpen Regional Summit that took place at the end of July. This was in Liberty, Missouri, just north of Kansas City. This was the first event of its kind. We are going to have 2 more in the coming weeks, actually. I'm headed to Boston, Massachusetts at the end of this week for the next one. This was the first one. So we had 130 people that represented over 40 districts from around the area in Missouri, Iowa, Nebraska, and Kansas. They were all able to attend and hear directly from the teachers that were doing this work in Liberty Public Schools, but also in surrounding school districts like North Kansas City, Lawrence Public Schools in Lawrence, Kansas. And the goal of these regional summits is to provide kind of a primer on what open educational resources are, how to get started, where to even start finding some of these resources. It's kind of, we have it tracked for those that are getting started, and that would be track 1. Track 2 is for our GoOpen launch districts that have started doing some of this work but want time to work on next steps. Track 3 is for the GoOpen ambassador districts that have been doing this for a while but want time to work with one another. And then Liberty actually had a 4th track where it was things that didn't necessarily fit in the other 3. So they talked about the financial implications of doing this, huge cost savings, much like North Kansas City's cost savings that I shared a moment ago, but also, leveraging the school librarians in a lot of this work as well, and talking about professional learning and how they can start to leverage the school librarians in the professional learning with their respective teachers within the district. So we are excited that we have 2 more on the calendar right now. Again, Cambridge or Boston area this Friday, and then in 2 weeks I'll be out in San Diego for the next one out there. And I have been talking to Iowa as well, your media directors at the AEA, and hoping that we might be able to get one in Iowa coming shortly. So we shall see. But when we talk about GoOpen, we talk about these 3 things specifically: our proof points, which are examples and seeing how this really has impacted districts across the country, the guidance and support that we can provide or that our committed organizations can provide, and then what this looks like as far as infrastructure. So we are currently sitting at 72 GoOpen districts. This is directly from our website, which is tech.ed.gov. And then you can go in there and find out more information about GoOpen specifically. If you really want to spend the time counting all of these districts, you will see that not all of them are represented. We are working on updating our website now, just so you all are aware. But we're excited to see so many interested in getting started in this work. So that's why there are obviously more launch districts, but we're adding more ambassador districts as well. I have a call with a couple of districts in Washington State tomorrow that have been doing this for the past 3 years, and they just now found out about GoOpen, and now they want to get involved. So we're excited to be able to add more districts along the way. Broken Arrow Public Schools is our most recent ambassador district, and they started in 6th grade science as well. It's a popular content area and grade level to get started, apparently. But they were talking about the cost savings, and that, yes, there clearly was a cost savings, but they were also talking about how they've been able to personalize the actual content for their students. They, again, started with CK12 Flexbooks, much like North Kansas City, and they were able to regionalize and localize a lot of the content that was in there so that they can include things from Oklahoma history, and even more specifically within the Broken Arrow area. And so it has really made this learning relevant for their students, but also engaging so that the students see themselves in the content that they're reading, and they've seen an increase in engagement overall across the board for all of the content areas that they've been able to implement these resources. We are currently at, oh my goodness, I need to update this. Okay, we're at 17 official GoOpen states. This happened last week, actually. We added Washington State as our 17th official GoOpen state. And much like I had mentioned earlier, they are looking at providing a statewide repository to be able to search and discover a lot of these resources, so that folks in Nebraska that share resources can look at those in Arizona and say, you know what, Nebraska Department of Education already said that this would be a good resource, so I'm going to use it here in Arizona. And that reciprocal and collaborative nature between the state departments of education is really helpful. We can leverage those resources, because I know right now, if I go look at Utah Education Network, their website, they have an entire set of curricula that's already been created over the past couple of years in science, very specifically. And so if I am new to this, I don't necessarily want to replicate that. And we don't want to have any redundancies like that. So we can focus on something else and use the resources that are already out there. ASCD has 2 different case studies specifically focused on GoOpen. The California, Ohio, Wisconsin, or COW project is one of them that they highlight. It is an interstate, interdisciplinary, and project that a couple of the superintendents, well, all 3 of the superintendents met at an event, and they said, let's try doing something a little different. and they started in the middle school, and they're now going to be going on to their second year of, it's the Cow 2 project. And they had great success with it. It was very project-based, but they realized that the content they would find off the shelves wasn't going to meet their needs. And so they were able to leverage the open educational resources that they found online to curate and then put those all together for their content they were going to use. ASCD also did a Smart Reef survey for us at the end of January, where 259 districts were responded, and they talked about the prevalence and use of open educational resources. 52% said that they used them somewhat or very often whenever they talked about using these resources. A lot of times it comes down to awareness of what open educational resources are. So I've used openly licensed educational resources and open educational resources interchangeably. They are one and the same. It is an open license on a specific material. And so it's an awareness of what these materials are and where to find them, because we think that this percentage is actually a lot higher, especially when you start to consider that, again, as a former classroom teacher, I know that I supplemented a lot of my district issued curriculum with resources that I found online. So we know that that happens in classrooms all across the country. So if we can make people or make teachers aware of the different resources that are out there and that are openly licensed, then we think that this number would be a lot higher. Additionally, we have 12 GoOpen Stories on our OET website. It's tech.ed.gov, and then you can go on there and search for the GoOpen Stories. These are stories from both our ambassador and our launch districts, and they just talk about the challenges and then the potential solutions that they've had for those challenges in their districts and what this has looked like at the district level, making this transition. Guidance and support, we have support from Creative Commons, who's been developing professional learning pieces, whether that's slide decks or flyers or whatever that may look like. They have developed some of that, and we're working with them to continue to expand the resources that they have available for district level folks to be able to share with teachers to make people aware, again, of open licensed educational resources. ASCD, as well as Center for Digital Education, ISTE, and COSIN have also been helping in this process. CDE released this guide to choosing digital content and curriculum at the end of June. This would have been with us at ISTE. And this is the first time that in a publication you actually see the pros and cons sitting in the same kind of paragraph, looking at proprietary versus free versus openly licensed. And that's the first time that you've actually, that we've actually seen that in print whenever you start to look at content and curriculum, which makes us really excited to see that people are starting to definitely consider these as valuable and valid resources. The infrastructure. So you may be getting to the point where you're thinking like, okay, great, you keep talking about all this, it sounds great, it's fine and dandy. Where do I find these things? So I am a federal government employee. Hi. So I cannot tell you where to find these things per se, but I can direct you to our 5 GoOpen platforms that are working with us: Amazon, Edmodo, Follett, Microsoft, and OER Commons. So a lot of times when you first get started, you may not know where to go. These 5 I would definitely point you to in their general direction. Amazon is working on a full public release of Amazon Inspire within the next couple of weeks. But you can access the Edmodo Follett primarily through your school libraries, microsoftdocs.com, and then OER Commons. And there are other ones that I mentioned that are not listed here, like a ck12.org. There are places that I could certainly point you to. These are the 5 ones that we have commitments from that are working with us, and I'm going to get kind of technical here. They're working with us in the Learning Registry, which is out of my office here. It was a joint project between the U.S. Department of Education and the Department of Defense, where we would create a digital card catalog of metadata. And you may be going, what is she talking about? But if you have ever used something like Delicious or Digo, any of those bookmarking tools where you bookmark a website and then you add a keyword next to the bookmark so that it helps you remember why you bookmarked it, that is metadata or meta tagging something. So we're working with this digital card catalog of meta tags that are associated with different resources, whether that is a Khan Academy video that is teaching you all about statistics and specifically like a T-chart, whatever that may look like. They are tagged with certain things next to it. And then these platforms are working on the front end so that they can search this digital card catalog for these resources. So if you went to learningregistry.org, I'm just going to tell you it is not pretty. It is meant to serve as that back end. And then these 5 platforms are serving as that front end that makes the searching and discovering much easier to do. We're also working with all of these platforms so that whenever you're in their environment, so if I'm in an Amazon Inspire and I upload something like a resource, whether it is for my classroom or whether it's for professional development, that when I upload it and I put it in their actual ecosystem, that it gets published to the Learning Registry so that I could be in microsoftdocs.com and do a search for something that might be tied to that meta tag and be able to find it in there. So it's kind of platform agnostic so that they're all doing the search in the same place. Follett right now is one of the only ones that you can actually do a search for open educational resources. The other 4 are working on the full integration, but Follett has theirs ready to go. They tweeted about 3 weeks ago and said, go in and search for it. So if you have Follett Destiny in your school libraries, I would encourage you to go in there and do a search. Up at the top, you can kind of see right here where it says all books, digital, and databases. Then there's a 4th tab and it says open educational resources. A 5th tab. But you can see that that is an option for you to be able to search. So last week, my office released a whole series of blog posts talking about personalized learning. Personalized learning is, nothing new. We've certainly had different definitions from INACOL to ISTE to whatever organization you want to insert in there. But we had never really looked at it from our own office. And so we started to look at it and how different things that we're doing in our office addresses how we can personalize learning. I specifically wrote a blog post on how openly licensed educational resources will allow us to personalize teaching and learning because of how we can make things relevant, specifically for our students, whether it is based on student need or student interest. I can provide my students different learning pathways and I can get access to those resources to give that to the students. It is a shift. We're moving away from a teacher-centered classroom to more of a student-centered classroom and possibly getting the students involved in searching for these resources as well. But it definitely allows us to start to think about how we can personalize these experiences for our students. And then for some of you that are instructional coaches and you're thinking, I could certainly start to curate some of these resources and give them to my teachers that I'm working with. So let's say you're a math instructional coach and you know that there's a 3rd grade math teacher or a 3rd grade teacher that needs some additional math resources. There are resources out there for you to do that. And it may be a different way of how a specific skill is taught. We have the ability to go out there and search and discover these resources that could be very helpful, and just another way of looking at things as well. My last question is, how do you advocate for OER and GoOpen in your districts? Well, I would definitely point you to our website, tech.ed.gov, which has more information on GoOpen specifically. But kind of look around, the 5 different GoOpen platforms currently. Dig into some of the resources that they have. Start to see what's out there and how you can start to leverage those supplementally. We have newer districts that are joining us as, again, with the 2 districts that I have a conversation with tomorrow. We're excited that we can have this conversation where they choose to go open right now, that they're working through the GoOpen District launch packet this semester. They're starting to curate and create resources that they can implement supplementally in the spring semester. And then they're getting together their teams over the summer so that they can develop full units of study that they can use instead of traditional instructional materials. And then come next school year or next fall, they would be ready to do the full transition to the use of these resources versus a traditional textbook or traditional instructional materials. So we're at the perfect time right now to really start to dive into this and look into what's already out there or what needs to be created, what are the district needs, and what are the things that we can find to help meet those needs. So I have talked far too long, and I'm going to pause. And I would love just some thoughts or some questions that you may have. Don't forget to unmute, and then hopefully I can answer some of your questions.
Hey, Kristina, is there a vetting process for the stuff that's added up to the marketplaces or to the, so what does that look like?
That's a great question. And that is probably the most commonly asked question. Really, if you are looking at like an Amazon Inspire specifically right now, their model is crowdsourcing. And that's what you will find a lot of these platforms are doing. They're basing it off of reviews from districts, from teachers, from individual teachers. Amazon Inspire's platform looks exactly like Amazon. It's a 5-star rating. You can leave a review. You can do all of that. So what we see most often with our GoOpen districts is that they will do some sort of rubric from the district level to make sure that the quality matches what they're looking for at the district level. There are a couple out there that are in existence. Achieve has a rubric specifically focused on open educational resources. And then some districts have tailored that rubric for kind of the look-fors that they want in their own districts. So Lawrence Public Schools in Lawrence, Kansas, they took the Achieve rubric because it's openly licensed. They were able to revise it and kind of look and create some look-fors what they wanted in their specific district. But as an overall and overarching quality assurance piece, it's really based off of the users that are using it, that are willing to go back in there and review it. And then what you'll notice is the algorithm, the more it's downloaded, the more it's used, or the higher it's rated, it's going to bump up into the overall search results. Tyler, thanks for your comment there. Yes, we would love to see more non-core content area resources developed and created. Unfortunately, that is one area we know that there certainly are not a wealth of resources right now. And I'm sure that that's not what he wanted to hear when you said he could create his own. But yes, we know that there are more resources that are being created. We just need to, again, expand that whole idea of sharing. Any other thoughts or general feedback on the whole GoOpen movement for me to take back to my team or anything?
I'm looking at the Amazon Inspire page right now. It says enter access code. Is there some code that we need to enter to?
Yeah, so they have not officially launched it publicly. That's coming up in a few weeks. There are some folks that are beta users right now and can get you an access code or can add you to the waiting list, but that is coming up shortly.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But the other ones, OER Commons is live and going right now, and Edmodo.
Yeah. Yep. And Edmodo, it's not in the regular Edmodo that you may be familiar with. It's Edmodo Spotlight. So it's spotlight.edmodo.com. And that's where you can go in and start to look for their resources. MicrosoftDocs.com. And then, yeah, OER Commons is already up and running as well.
But the Edmodo stuff, you can take it, download it, and you don't necessarily have to be an Edmodo user or whatever to utilize it.
Right. And Nate, your question, thank you for your question. The idea is that we are trying to ditch kind of the traditional model, especially the teacher-centered model that we're giving the classroom over to the students, and then it becomes more student-centered, and that we're personalizing that learning through the use of these open educational resources. So we can curate existing resources that are already out there, again, leveraging the things that many people have already created. In the Learning Registry, once these platforms are fully integrated, there's already over 90,000 resources that exist that are openly licensed, and they range in grade level and in content area, primarily more in core content areas, and I would say even more focused on middle school and high school than K-5. We're really working on expanding K-5 right now. But yes, the idea is that we could switch over from that traditional model to being able to use these. And I am working with Iowa. Fingers crossed. I'm working on Iowa. I had the chance to meet with your director at the Department of Education, Ryan Wise, and he was able to hear this presentation at the end of August when I was in Des Moines with the media directors, and was very interested to hear about this. I think your AEAs are very strong in what they do as well, the services and the folks that they have on staff. I think that there can be some really great direction from the AEAs, and from my Nebraska friends, from you as well, from the ESUs over in Nebraska as well. It's hard. It's very bizarre as an official Nebraska Department of Education employee that now works for the federal government. I can't really talk to my Nebraska colleagues because it's considered a conflict of interest. So I can certainly ask Darcy, Tina, and Becky to say, hey, have you heard about this? I think we should consider this. And I know that Stacy had shared the SMORE that had access to the different links. Please feel free to check out those links. tech.ed.gov is probably the easiest thing to get to. And then you can go in and search either the GoOpen Stories or the GoOpen pages, and then see the commitments for a district or for even states to see what would be involved in that. Any other questions or comments for me? I taught elementary school. I have a really good wait time. All right. Well, I have gone over by about 10 minutes, and I apologize for that, but appreciate all your time. And if you have any other questions for me, I'm on Twitter. I'm at Mrs. KM Peters. You are welcome to contact me there. You're also welcome to give me a shout via email, and I'm just at at ed.gov. I'm trying to write that in the chat right now. So Twitter is probably the best way to reach me, but email is also a good way too. So I appreciate it, and let me know if I can help with anything moving forward.
Great. Thanks, Kristina.